Hey folks, welcome to another episode of Pick Up and Play. My name is DJ Switch, and today I've got a very special guest all the way from the United Kingdom. His name is Ian McCranor, and he played the character Angus in the video game Kasumi Ninja back on the Jaguar in, I believe, 1994. Here's the thing. Many folks remember this character as the Scottish fighter that would lift his kilt to shoot fireballs. But it turns out Ian's considerably more than that. Champion, combat athlete, and an author. And so in today's episode, I wanted to give just a little bit of a heads up. We're going to, at some point in the episode, start trading a few stories from both mine and Ian's time working in the nightlife industry. He over in the UK, myself here in Portland. And some of these stories are pretty graphic and pretty violent. So I just wanted to let folks know that while this is not typical for my podcast, it was an important conversation, partly because the book I think is incredibly fascinating, but also because it afforded me an opportunity to share some stories that I've never shared publicly. Before we get into the interview today, of course, I have to give a big shout out to my friends at the Portland Retro Gaming Expo for helping to support this show, as well as my friends at Vault 31 Bar for sponsoring the show and making sure that the bills stay paid so that the show can continue. I also have a little bit of an update for what's going on over at Vault 31 Bar, so keep an eye out for that during the mid-show break. However, the time has come to get into my interview with Ian McCranor. Ian McCranor, thank you so much for joining me today from all the way over in the UK.
Yes. Thank you for the invite.
Well, no, listen. I appreciate you being gracious and suggesting that I invited you. But as a matter of fact, you reached out to me, and I am so grateful that you reached out to me, especially because I had a cancellation this week. So like the timing was absolutely perfect. And then as I got kind of into doing a little homework about you and trying to find out more about you, man, like the more I found out about you, the more interesting your story became. And so I was like, no, I got to talk to this guy. I have to get him on the show. I have to find out a little bit more about like what his deal is, man. So
Right.
I know right now you're talking to a lot of folks in the retro gaming scene and sort of tying it back to your role as Angus from Kasumi Ninja, the fighter that was available on the Jaguar back in the day. You've also got a book out, which I definitely want to touch on the book here in just a little bit. But just to kind of, get this whole interview started, I got to know, man, how's it been for you hanging out with a bunch of gamers and talking about the old Jaguar days and that sort of thing?
Right. The gaming scene in general for me is completely, totally new. It's something I never thought I'd be involved in the manner that I'm involved in it now. I literally 30 years ago was invited via a phone call from a friend of a friend and asked me if I wanted to be involved in a video game. And I ended up being Angus MacGregor in Kasumi Ninja. Fast forward 30 years, and you just wouldn't believe that a seed planted 30 years ago would start blossoming right now. And I found myself through people talking about the game, talking about the character, people reaching out to me and saying, do you want to go to conventions? I've been to a few conventions, and I have to tell you, it isn't what I thought it would be. I kind of thought a convention, a gaming convention, was all about the games, playing games, but it really isn't. The gaming community, I have to tell you, there is zero ego, and they're the nicest people, nicest people you ever want to meet. And they don't just talk about games. I know that when people play games, there's like an escapism. But the people that I'm talking to are just generally the nicest people. If everybody on the planet was like a gamer, there would be no wars. There would be no arguments. There'd be nothing. They're the nicest people I ever want to meet. So I'm enjoying going to the conventions. But I'm more excited about talking to and meeting the people and getting to know what's in their heads. It's been a fantastic experience so far.
That I love to hear that, because, you know, being a gamer and being part of that community has been so core to my identity and the identity of a lot of the people that are, you know, sort of in my circle, and being able to share that passion and being able to share the excitement that we get over things that some folks outside that community sort of see as trivial, but
Right.
we see it as, you know, another thing to get excited about, or another thing to truly enjoy, and
Yeah.
it sort of comes from that place of passion and joy, and so it must be really cool to see something that you were involved in 30 years ago still bringing people joy to this day.
It really is. The weekend I've just been on now was in Wolverhampton in England, but the experience I had there was, I'll give you one example.
Mm-hmm.
A young lad with his mother came to the table, and he got the Jaguar booklet with all the games mentioned in there, and he was obviously autistic, and he came up with this book, and he opened the book for me, and he said, "Look, you're in this book." And there's like 2 pages all about Angus MacGregor and about Kasumi Ninja. And
Oh, wow.
he wanted me to sign an autograph and wanted me to put a message in for him and have a picture with him. And he was very, very emotional about seeing somebody who's in the game. And it's things like that when you realize it isn't just about playing games. It's a lot more than that. I think you have to be involved in it to really appreciate it. And it's seeing kids like that, and adults were coming up as well and talking to me about how they played the game back in the day and how that character really kind of excited them because of the things he was doing that was different to what they'd seen before. And it's just a phenomenal experience meeting these people.
Now, I saw, as I was kind of digging around trying to find out more about Kasumi Ninja and about you, I saw something somewhere where you were talking about the experience of being in studio and sort of what it was at the time when you were, you know, in costume and sort of had to get into character for the motion cap stuff. And there were some ideas being thrown around in the room, and it seemed like some of those ideas were yours. Can you talk a little bit about
Yeah.
some of your special moves and finishers and that kind of thing?
Yeah. Like I said, when I got there, I really didn't have a clue what I was doing. I thought I set up, and I thought that I'd get to the studio and it wouldn't be what these friends of mine, so-called friends of mine, had told me it was going to be. But when I got there, it was a computer game, obviously. And when they sat me in the chair, and they, bear in mind, I didn't know what I was going to do. They gave me a kilt, they gave me a sporran, a waistcoat, like a Scotsman, and said, "I want you to wear these. You're going to play this character." And they stuck a big red beard on me. And then when we got in front of the green screen, I recall them saying, "So what have you got for us?" And I said, "What do you mean? What have I got for you? What do you want me to do?" Well, we kind of see Angus as a brawler. We see him, as a Scottish brawler, but don't be too karate-fied. You don't make it look too karate. It's got to be a combination of. And I thought, well, I can do that. I've done a bit of brawling. I'm involved in karate. So let's see what we got. So they really didn't. They got a rough idea of what they wanted the character to do, but they didn't have any specifics. I think the only specific I remember is them saying, "You know what a caber toss is?"
Mm-hmm.
They're tossing the caber. So the Scotsman he wants to go down and then like lifting this big tree, big log,
like a telephone pole kind of thing.
Correct. That's what it is.
Yeah.
But to turn it over.
Right.
So I think the only thing that I recall them giving me direction in was he needs to do a caber toss type move. So we kind of threw some ideas around, and I said, well, why don't I lift my kilt and a flame comes out, And yeah, I kind of thought about it, and the guy says, yeah, I like that idea. And I thought, really? Oh, okay, why not? And then for the death move, I said, why don't we, if I turn round, can you make somebody's head fly off in the game? Yeah, we can do that. Okay. So I didn't know. So how about if I turn around, I kick somebody's head off, and when it comes down, I'll headbutt it, look at the camera and go, okay, like a Scotsman, oh, yes. And he said, yeah, great. And of course, back in those days, we hadn't got the internet. I couldn't just go home and get on the internet after a few weeks and kind of research how it was doing or when it was going to be released or how it looked. I waited months and months and months buying magazines to find out how it was doing, what's happening.
Yeah.
And it was it was a good few months later that I actually had to go out and buy the console, the Jaguar, and buy the game Kasumi Ninja to actually
They didn't even give you a copy of the game?
No. When I walked away from that shoot, I didn't see them again, never spoke to them again, had no connection to the game whatsoever. In actual fact, I was telling somebody this morning, it cost me more to buy the game and buy the console than I got paid to do the shoot.
How much did you get paid for that?
I think I got paid about £200 for it for the day. £200. So maybe.
Well, you're rich now.
What's that?
Now you're rich. £200. That's a lot of money.
I think the console then was about the same price as the console and the game was the same price as I got paid, plus traveling expenses and all the rest of it. So I made no money out whatsoever. There were no residuals. There was nothing. So hopefully now I can get a little bit of recognition for what I did.
I think the best part of all of this for me is that you took an afternoon to make 200 pounds 30 years ago, and now you get to have an inroad into a community that, so far as I've seen, has been completely welcoming to you.
Absolutely.
Has enjoyed having you. Everyone that I've spoken to, or even yesterday, the folks who sponsor this show, they're going through a remodel right now. It's a local gaming bar that just bought the space next to theirs, and they're remodeling it into a cafe and coffee shop that's going to be attached. And so they're doing a big demo, knocking a big hole in the wall and doing all this stuff. And I mentioned to the owner, I was like, hey, by the way, I'm going to be talking to Ian McCranor really soon on the podcast. He goes, oh yeah, who's that? I said, well, do you ever play this game Kasumi Ninja? Oh my God, I loved Kasumi Ninja. Yeah, well, he's the guy that played Angus on Kasumi. No way. Like he completely loved that character, loved that game.
Yeah.
And it's also kind of funny to me that character seems to have really stood out to folks, and I think a lot of it is just the personality of some of those moves and some of the stuff that you brought to the table in the room.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that you spoke to somebody completely not connected to you in the gaming industry, and you mentioned Angus, and they go, oh yeah, I remember him. Literally just a few hours ago, literally on the train back from Wolverhampton, two guys, I'm guessing maybe in their 40s, late 40s, came and sat on the two seats opposite me.
Yeah.
And we got chatting, and I got like a small suitcase with me, and get talking. So I just, cause the train goes through a station that stops at the airport, and he says, oh, have you been on holiday, on vacation? And I said, no, I've just come from, and I started explaining to them where I'd been and what I was doing, and they were interested. And so he said, oh, you were in a game? And I told them I was in a game. He said, oh, what characters you play? And I said, Angus MacGregor and Kasumi Ninja. And I just thought they wouldn't know anything like that. And so one guy goes, not the guy who fires the flame from under his kilt. And I said, I cannot believe a complete stranger And we haven't spoken about this for 30 years. A complete stranger is saying the same thing. Isn't that bizarre?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. And that's the best part, I think, about video gaming, but specifically the sort of what we call the retro gaming era, right? The 80s and 90s. When we didn't have things like YouTube, we didn't have a lot of like heavy consumption of like independently created work. And so it's weird. I was just having a conversation with a friend of mine recently about this, how after the 90s we got YouTube in like 2005 or 6. So everything sort of before 2005 or 6 was all stuff that we were consuming through the same television networks or through the same video games, or through the same music channels and outlets or radio stations. And so culturally, there was sort of like a funnel. It was a little bit like a pyramid, where like there was sort of a sort of a narrow sort of top of the culture where everybody was sort of focused on this small amount of work being created. And then as you get further and further away from the sort of popularity status stuff, you sort of broaden out at the base, right?
Right.
But now, so many kids now are growing up being used to seeing their friends' YouTube channels or seeing, and we all still only have the same 24 hours in a day.
Correct.
And
Yeah.
so, coming from the music industry, it's so hard to get traction now because everyone's attention is so split by the internet, which is kind of a good thing and a bad thing. But you were part of the video gaming industry when, there weren't a lot of games to play to begin with. There certainly in the early 90s weren't a lot of games using real motion capture with real people.
Yeah.
Nobody motion captured Sonic the Hedgehog, right? So,
No.
so guys like you were really at the very, very early days, the very forefront of attaching real humans to the images that we were seeing on screens.
Right. And I also I did 2 games that were actually motion capture as well. The Kasumi Ninja was green screen, but I did 2 games that were motion capture. And it was a while after Kasumi Ninja. I was contacted again, and I played the role of Robin in Batman and Robin, the one with George. Was it George Clooney? It was with Mr. Freeze.
Yeah, Arnold Schwarzenegger and
yeah.
Who Uma Thurman, I think, was in that one.
Yeah, so I was in that one for the PlayStation, and also for and I think there were 1 or 2 versions made also of the Fantastic Four. I was the Thing in Fantastic Four, but all I did, I recall on that one, was thump the floor and point to the air. I mean, anybody could have done it, but it was still, you still wore this black, I guess like a leotard. You're almost naked, and the little dots on your elbow and all your joints, and they make a matchstick figure, and then so motion capture. And I then went and watched the guys in a dark room on the computer screen taking this matchstick figure and doing stuff with it, and I was amazed because, like you say, it was just at the forefront of this kind of technology, wasn't it? The motion capture was pretty new, and I didn't realize at the time that I was involved in something that was still probably experimental or still in its early stages. And of course, it's advanced a lot now, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you can't see anything come out of Hollywood anymore that doesn't have some level of motion capture and CG. I mean, they're even taking actors from things that we loved 30, 40 years ago and using the actor, like in the case of Luke Skywalker, when he showed up on The Mandalorian, they had Mark Hamill show up and record a thing, and then they used computers to make him look 30 years younger.
Wow. Yeah.
And so, and it, famously with mixed results.
Yeah.
But the fact they can do it at all, a lot of folks, I think, maybe don't realize that there was a time not that long ago, when you were still active in that, in doing that very thing, for example, that it was a very rare and special thing. It was
Yeah.
not really something that every movie and every TV show took advantage of because the technology just wasn't that widely available at the
Yeah,
time.
but I couldn't even go onto the internet because it didn't exist. Sounds
Yeah,
crazy. 30 years ago, I'm sure it did, but not in every home.
right.
And I couldn't just go on the internet and research what I'd done or what other people were doing. It was completely off the cuff. It was you got in, you'd done your thing, you walked out, and never talked about it again. Which is crazy. That wouldn't happen today.
Yeah, uh, it's one of the things that I really love about being a part of this retro community. And it's so funny because like we call it the retro gaming community because retro gaming is very central to what we're all passionate about and what we all share with each other. But there's so much about the retro gaming community that bleeds into, you know, classic films and classic music. As the DJ for the Portland Retro Gaming Expo, I'm here to tell you, like, I get people all the time asking me to play video game soundtrack stuff. And I try to accommodate that a lot. But the reality is, in the arcades in the 80s, nobody was listening to video game music
Right.
unless it was coming directly from the machine they were playing.
Mm-hmm.
Most of what was being played in the arcades back then was Rush and Queen and Foreigner and, like
Yeah.
all these classic rock bands, man. And, and so like I try to keep a level of that authenticity as best I can when playing the music for that stuff. But, people sort of have this disconnect of like, really just how limited things were back then compared to what they are now.
Right. Yeah.
There's that phrase, the cream always rises to the top.
Yeah.
Never was that more true than in the old days when the cream rising to the top meant that it had to get through, financial and technical barriers that for most people were just outrageously impossible.
Yeah.
Most video games back then couldn't use motion cap because it was so ridiculously expensive to do in the first place.
But the reason they can do it all now is because of the mistakes they made in the days that we were doing it. So there might have been mistakes and it might not look the way it looks today, but it's because of those mistakes and because of that experience that you've got what you've got now.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think that's the sort of the other component. And maybe you've seen this in your experience, traveling around and doing some of these retro gaming events that you've been doing. But I know for me and for a lot of my friends in the retro scene here in the Portland area, we're grateful. We're truly like, it's sort of like an ongoing case study of, being grateful for what we had at that time, because now that we're older and we've sort of seen how it's evolved over time, the farther along we get, the more we realize just how rough and tumble it really was to create something back then.
Yeah.
And so just how rare and special it was and how much more rare and special it becomes as time goes on.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we're fortunate to have folks like you that are still around and still talking about the stories from back then. And so I know you mentioned a couple of the other games that you've been involved with. Was creating video games ever part of your plan as an entertainer or as a, as you described it, a combat athlete? Was that like on purpose or did it just kind of like happen?
It just happened. It never even occurred to me that motion capture existed. I never knew what a green screen was. I mean, I was completely, totally naive. No idea whatsoever. I played video games. I think it was maybe Street Fighter. I don't think Mortal Kombat was around then. That come later. You'll know better than I do. 94. So when did Mortal Kombat first hit the...
I think the year before. I think the original Mortal Kombat, I think, released in 93, if I remember right.
And that was an arcade. Was that an arcade machines, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe I did play that, but I was in pubs with friends and playing Street Fighter, Pac-Man, Space Invaders, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So that's kind of what I knew about video games, really. I wasn't really big on it.
Beeps and boops and pixels and
yeah,
all that. Yeah.
So when somebody asked me to do that game, I never really visualized myself in a computer game, people playing it. I just visualized myself doing that game, that shoot that day, and then at some point I'll see it. So was I excited about it? I guess I was, but not as excited as I would be today. If somebody said to me today, we want to have you to do some more motion capture, I would be ecstatic because I kind of know what I'm going to see the end result as because I've seen so many games. But back in the day, you walk in, you do the stuff, and you walk out, and you pretty much forget it. Batman and Robin came about because totally unrelated to Kasumi Ninja, I was writing for a karate magazine. I was competing internationally karate at the time, and I was writing for a karate magazine. And the editor called me and said, Probe Entertainment, which was in Croydon in London, are making a game called Batman and Robin for Acclaim Entertainment. And I said, I have no idea who Acclaim Entertainment is.
Acclaim, who are they?
I don't know, but yeah, I'll do it. So I went down, did that. Or I think maybe, I'll lie now, I think maybe Fantastic Four was first. And at the point I kind of thought, I'm enjoying this. I wish there was better money in it. I wish I could make some money out of this.
Right.
You know?
Right.
But I assumed when I walked away from both of those gigs, I assumed that that's what happens. You walk away and it's over. But that isn't true today. There are people involved in video games today who, like Mortal Kombat people, they have been on the convention scene for a long time. They're doing really, I don't know how they're doing financially with it, but they're certainly showing up at places and doing lots of conventions. But they seem to, and quite rightly, they deserve it. They have got the respect. The game was good. It was great. It was well received, and they're well known. And they deserve every part of that. And I do look and think, it's a shame I wasn't in a better, more well-received games, because all three of them, Kasumi Ninja, Batman and Robin, and Fantastic Four, all of them, I think at best, were kind of mediocre to the players. They
Sure.
weren't like fantastic games. So I walked away thinking that's what happens to somebody involved in video games. You do your thing, you walk away, they forget about you.
Yeah.
But that isn't true today. I'm kind of being picked up everywhere now. So,
Well, and I have a theory about that, and I think especially after doing a little bit of homework, kind of finding out what you've been going through in the recent few months, recent year or so. I've been learning a little bit more about the people still remember the character of Angus. Like I was saying before, specifically because of the personality of the character, not necessarily the game itself. It's almost like people remember the game because of Angus and not the other way around.
Everybody this weekend, every single person I met said the same thing.
Yeah.
Everybody, yeah.
And bringing that kind of personality out in something like a motion cap or something like a green screen, where you're having to sort of like translate through your own ideas into a character that you're portraying. I mean, that's every actor's dream.
Yeah.
Not every actor is looking to buy a yacht and become a bajillionaire. But every actor that gets into acting wants to be able to create something that is remembered.
Right.
And so, I think it's really special that you were able to create something with Angus that people remember fondly and was able to have that kind of impact, especially like you said, because the game itself was, it was fine. It just sort of was what it was. It wasn't particularly groundbreaking. It's never going to be in a conversation of greatest games of all time.
No.
But people remember the character, and
Yeah.
and so it was I think really special to me to sort of discover that as I was reading through some of the interviews you've done and talking a little bit about creating that character to realize that like, no, those were your ideas.
Yeah.
And that the stuff that made Angus so memorable was stuff that you were like, hey, what if we did this?
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
that simple.
That's all it was. It was just a split second. Of course, it was 30 years ago, so my might be a bit foggy up there, trying to remember everything that happened.
You don't
But
remember what you had for breakfast that day?
I don't know this morning what I had for breakfast about that day. But I absolutely 100% remember standing there and thinking, what have I got into? Because when they said, what have you got? I have no idea. Let's just make it up on the spot, shall we? And then, of course, my creativity kind of led the way. Then, I thought of something, and it can be a curse sometimes, but I'll say something before thinking about should I say something. So when I thought, how about a flame comes out? What I should have done is like, don't say that. But I did. Let's just lift the kilt and a flame comes out. And if I hadn't said that, if it hadn't come out, it wouldn't be there, would it? So it's probably not a bad thing, but I do things like that sometimes.
And if I had $1 for every time that I've seen, let me back that up. Let me rephrase this. The best part of Scottish tropes is that a lot of the Scottish folks seem to really love and embrace them.
Mm.
So when you see something like a character lifting his kilt and having a literal fire crotch,
yeah,
and then you see it sort of like received with a lot of chuckles and smirks and giggles, and like it makes people happy without hurting anybody's feelings.
Talking about hurting somebody's feelings, I have a question for you actually to find out what your thoughts on this, because it never occurred to me at all until a few days ago. I've been, as you've probably seen, posting as much as I can on social media to try and build a profile of this character and myself, obviously. And I've posted quite regularly the scene where Angus, the death move, he punches, elbows, punches, turns around, kicks the person's head off, and then headbutts it.
Right.
Now, the person I'm doing it to, or Angus is doing it to, is a female.
Mm.
But the female in Kasumi Ninja is a fighter, and she disembowels people anyway.
Right.
So it's not like it's real. But I had somebody message and say, what have you posted that for? And I put a question mark, and they said,
yeah,
female abuse, beating a woman up. Kids are going to see that, and they're going to have ideas. And never occurred to me. I still don't think that's true. I mean, I play, I'm not big on video games, but I do like to play Grand Theft Auto. And I spend most of the time just killing people and blowing things up.
Mm-hmm.
But I would never, ever go and do that. I mean, somebody's going to do that. They're going to do that without being seen on a video game.
Right.
But for a character in a game to be hitting a woman, kicking her head off, and then headbutting it and celebrating it, is that something these days we should be worried about? Is it something that somebody's going to look at and say that shouldn't be shown? Have we got to that stage?
Let me start by saying, as another white dude, like, my opinion on this only can go so far. And I think it's important just to at least acknowledge that, like, yeah, like, my opinions on how women are portrayed and violence against women is portrayed in media is not a conversation that I can really comfortably get too deep with.
Right.
That being said, I would love to know Liz Malecki's response to that question, because as you know, Liz played the original Sonya Blade in Mortal Kombat, and I know some folks, both men and women, who would respond to that with, these women are perfectly capable of defending themselves and fighting for themselves. And it's not like, I think it's a bit different with a game like Grand Theft Auto, where the traditionally with Grand Theft Auto, you have women who aren't able to defend themselves.
Right. Yeah.
And violence against women for the sake of abusing power over those women is kind of gross and disgusting.
Right.
But when you're two fighting characters in a fighting video game, and she has every bit as much of an opportunity to defeat you,
right,
your character, as your character does to defeat her character, then I think it creates a more even playing field.
Yeah. Is it any different than?
And the context is just not quite fair for that conversation, I think.
Yeah. Is it any different to the movie Kill Bill, where the main character is a woman who is an assassin? He's just crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is different because, in the movies you're being told a story, but you're not controlling that story.
Yeah.
So I think, the movies versus video games argument kind of comes into play there, where with video games you're holding the controller.
Yeah.
But again, that being said, I think that in the context of a fighting game, it's not fair to the conversation, and frankly, not fair to women, who are perfectly capable humans in their own right, to just immediately assume that they're defenseless and weak.
I just thought it was interesting that somebody would have spotted that as a problem. It never even occurred to me.
Yeah, and so that's kind of my sort of like my last thought on that, is that in the context of the internet, on social media specifically, you have a lot of folks who will glance at something without context or without understanding what they're looking at and immediately react to it with their keyboard.
Right.
And the unfortunate reality, as we've learned over the last 20 years of the social media experiment, is that you will never be able to win over everyone. Everyone will see through a lens that is created by their own personal experiences and their own personal traumas. So unfortunately, I think that when it comes to sort of navigating social media, especially in that context of, being somebody who is known for being a fighter and portraying a fighting character in a video game, people are going to immediately see that and see violence. People are going to immediately see that and see violence against women. They're going to kind of see what they want to see, and they're not going to take the time to say, watch an hour-long podcast where you and I talk about this very thing, that's just the sort of unfortunate reality of the world we live in, where everyone can talk to anyone at any time for any reason. But that being said, we do need to take a quick ad break to shout out our sponsors. And when we come back, I want to talk a little bit about your book that you wrote. Because not only did I find the book really fascinating, but you and I have some things in common that I wasn't expecting.
Okay.
So let's get into that when we come back.
Indeed.
Folks, we interrupt our regular Vault 31 part message to bring you a special update on the current project, remodeling the space next door to the original Vault 31. They bought the space next to theirs, and they are currently working on removing a large convenience store type cooler that was left over from the previous two tenants of that space. They have no idea how long that thing has been in there, but what they do know is they've had several contractors come in there, charge them money, only to give the money back because they couldn't remove it. Well, I'm happy to report that today, as of the day of this recording, the cooler has been removed, and they can continue on with the remodel project, including creating a space between the current bar space and the new coffee shop space so that folks will be able to pass between the two freely. I cannot wait to see what else they have planned for this remodel, but I had to at least show you a little bit of what I was able to shoot when I went down to visit the team that's currently doing the demo project. With that, we're going to play our regular Vault 31 bar message and then get back to the interview. Folks, this episode has once again been sponsored by my friends at Vault 31 Bar. Just 10 minutes north of the Portland airport, Vault 31 is a video game themed bar built for absolutely everyone who loves gaming and geek culture. They offer an incredible selection of beverages and signature cocktails alongside tons of PC and console games available to play. And if you're hungry, they've got plenty of food available from their kitchen, including house-made pizzas, Smurshbergs, and all kinds of deliciously themed options. Anyone who's caught past episodes of this show knows that Vault 31 is all about inclusivity and wants to make sure that absolutely everyone is welcome. As part of their ongoing efforts to make sure they are a space for all gamers, they recently announced that they've purchased the space next door and will be renovating it into an all-ages coffee bar and lounge space so that even the under 21 folks will find safe harbor here. As if that wasn't enough, Vault 31 hosts all kinds of community events, including mini painting, tournaments, pride events, and is currently the home of my newest monthly lo-fi event, but you'll have to follow myself and Vault 31 on socials to find out more about that. Speaking of socials, you can visit them at vault31bar.com or at Vault31Bar on Facebook, Instagram, X, YouTube, and Twitch. Or honestly, just visit them in person. I promise there's no cryopods or vacuum cleaners with a human brain attached. If you know, you know. This place is freaking great. And if you're looking for a space that feels like home away from your nerd cave, Vault 31 is that place for me. Just tell them DJ Switch said hi. With that, let's get back to the show. So Ian, you wrote a book. When did you write the book? When did you originally publish? Was it last year? Or was it 2 years ago?
Yeah, I originally, it was self-published. Whatever self-published means, I didn't know at the time. I was kind of finding my way. So it was originally published June of last year.
Okay.
So it's had a year's run. But I've recently republished because we had a few hiccups, let's say. The book sold really, really well. Right. But I had a few hiccups with the people I was dealing with. Without going into all that, I just kind of moved on from them and doing it totally on my own now. So it's been out about a year.
Okay. I mean, and you know, those things happen. I helped my uncle self-publish about 4 books. And it was always the same story. Like, you know, they wanted too much money, or they didn't see his vision, or they wanted to disagree with him on what the cover looked like. I mean,
it's quite a minefield.
All kinds of stuff. Yeah. So the thing about this book, though, that really struck me was it starts out in the first chapter talking about your experience as a bouncer in the early 90s. Yeah. Which resonated with me because I've been a DJ for 25 years. My first residency at a nightclub was in 2009. And I've got a couple of stories to share with you about that, but the book itself isn't really about being a bouncer. It's not Roadhouse, right? It's not about fighting all the time. It's more about fighting with yourself internally and struggling with your own mental blocks. Yeah, as it were. And so I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit, just maybe a quick idea of like what the book's about and what gave you the idea to write something like this.
I kind of wanted to write something for a long, long time, but I'm not a writer. I'm not somebody who can sit down with a laptop and write. Spelling is awful. Very bad at spelling. So I say bad at spelling. I'm not a very confident speller. And that's the word. That's the big word that needs to be mentioned a lot. Is that the book is really about gaining confidence, because we assume that everybody can do and behave the same way, but they can't. And a lot of it's down to their confidence, their belief in themselves, their self-doubts. And the book is about I learned very, very early on to become somebody different, to achieve tasks. And once I realized I could do that, I found myself that I'd got alter egos. Everybody's got alter egos that they don't realize that if they work on it and they talk to their passion, they talk to their self-doubt, and they work really hard on bringing that alter ego out, they can be whoever they want to be. And I touch on in the book about how actors do that all the time. They spend their entire life being somebody else. You know, you wouldn't watch, I'm trying to think of a famous actor who is like phenomenal in a role. If that actor was themselves, they couldn't pull it off. They couldn't pull off that role. They have to become somebody that you believe. You totally 100% believe that they're that person. And when I realized that people treated me a certain way when they believed what I was showing them, if I was to show them the real me, even now, if I was to show them the real me, they would still see somebody who has anxiety, see somebody who doesn't have as much confidence as they believe I've got. But I've learned to become a person for a period of time. And being a bouncer was a great example of that, because I got very good at combat sport, competing in combat sports. But I was still scared of the real world. When you're involved in combat sport and you're sparring or fighting all the time, you make the mistake of believing that you can carry that ability into a street fight. You don't separate them. You think you can have a fight. When I realized that as a bouncer, there was very little fighting happening. When you think about what happens in a nightclub, and I guess you'll tell me some stories.
Oh, I've got stories for you.
You've been involved in. Very rarely do you see a fight. What you see is violence for short periods of time. That's what you see. When people see combat sport, somebody's getting hit, they can't feel it. They can't really see what's happening. But the damage is being done, even with a very slight hit. There's a lot of damage done. And when somebody gets hit on the street with a good punch, there's some serious damage taking place. And they don't fall over, get up, wipe their brow and get up and carry on fighting. A lot of the time they're in serious injury. There's some serious stuff going on. And I learned when I realized that, I stopped trying to be good at fighting when it came to dealing with street situations. I stopped trying to train to be good at fighting, and I got very, very good at being very, very violent for short periods of time. And that allowed me then to be violent in that job, but be an athlete in that sport. So I kind of separated them.
Yeah. And then to go home and be a dad.
And then go home and be a dad. And
yeah,
that's what in the first chapter, that's what I mentioned. And the first chapter was written like that because I wanted people to have an opinion of me. I wanted to read that and go, this guy's a bully. This guy's a thug. He just hits people and hurts people.
Yeah.
But I've got massive amounts of empathy, and I had to hold that back. And when you're holding back empathy, it's like a pressure cooker. It's just building and building and building and building. In that first chapter, when I've hurt these lads, I wanted to just sit down and cry. I wanted to just melt. It destroyed me. Well, but I couldn't. I still got the shift.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut in there, but I wanted to give you just a quick quote from the book because I wrote this down.
Okay.
You'd gone home after a particularly rough night at the nightclub. You were at a place called the Dog and Trumpet.
Dog and Trumpet, yeah.
And you went home after a really rough night. And I don't want to get too much into the story because I want folks to read the book and see just how bad it got for you. And how close it got to being much worse. Because you went back, you found the knives on the ground and stuff later.
Yeah.
But you said you went home 3 a.m. after a long night at the nightclub, and you poked your head in to give your son a kiss. And your son, you said, was it about 3 at the
About
time?
3 years of age or something, yeah.
And you said I'd sat and contemplated what I would do to anyone who hurt my child as I had done someone else's child that evening. Some might call it self-torture. To me, it was cathartic. It kept me in touch with my humanity. The overwhelming empathy that you'd fought to hold back earlier in the night came flooding back. You sat sobbing over your son until he woke up and reached for a hug.
Yeah.
I think, in my experience, working as a DJ in the nightclub space and having worked with door teams, guys whose job it is to protect everyone in that space from, doing serious harm to themselves, doing serious harm to others. When you choose to be tasked with the safety of others at the expense of your own, especially in that kind of environment where you've got drugs and alcohol and other sort of variables at play, I think it requires a certain kind of compassion.
Right.
I have never talked about this on air, which is part of the reason why I was really interested to have this conversation with you. I've never really spoken about this side of my career as a DJ. But I can confidently say without a doubt that had certain events in my career gone a different way, and I had not had my door teams there to do their job, I may not be here.
Oh, I've been there a few times. I saw that. Yeah.
Funny enough, you said the same thing at the end of that first chapter, that anybody who's worked in that nightlife industry is going to read this and go, yeah, I've been there.
Yeah.
There was a night, my very first club residency in 2009 was a place that's no longer around here in Portland, but it was there for 30 years. It was a well-known club. And there was a night on a Saturday where, the club was maybe half to 3/4 full. We were doing all right. It was an okay night. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, 30 people showed up all at the same time. And now we're packed. And I was working with another DJ. I was mostly doing MC work on Saturday nights because the primary DJ on our Saturday night at that club had been there since like 1978 or something. Like the dude was a straight up legend in this town. And he goes, "Hey, watch this and don't go anywhere." I was like, "Don't go anywhere." Like, as an MC, I'm running around with a wireless microphone. I'm partying with people. I'm hanging out with people. I'm coming up and down out of the booth all night. He goes, "No, I'll stay here," which he had never said to me before. And he points across the room, and on the far back side of the room, on the other side of the dance floor, we watched 30 people jump one dude and put him in an ambulance.
Yeah.
And I had a team of about 9 door guys to break up that brawl. And our entire door staff jumped in and tried to save this kid's life.
Yeah.
I'm happy to report that he survived. But that is the kind of experience that made me realize what kind of environment I was in and what kind of things can go wrong seemingly out of nowhere.
Yeah.
It just springs up on you.
Yeah.
You had kind of the same sort of thing in the book that you mentioned, and I can only imagine how many other countless times as a bouncer you had something just sort of get sprung on you that you weren't expecting. Was that for you, throwing yourself into that situation and putting yourself between the average club goer and the person looking for real trouble? what was it like to make that choice on a day-to-day basis, and how did you sort of create the mental headspace to be able to do that night after night?
Oh, so you're not talking about a specific incident, it's just in general.
Just generally speaking, we're talking, like, the book talks about, having to sort of create a persona that
Right.
allowed you to find the confidence to do that.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking more in terms of, it's a dangerous job.
Yeah.
And there are people who are on any manner of substances that don't care. You
Yeah.
talked about in the book, there's people that just don't care,
Yeah.
whether they hurt other people or not.
Yeah.
And you never know who those people are because they look like everybody else, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So how do you find the mental headspace to go, no, I'm going to go out here and I'm going to protect people, even if it means putting myself in danger?
It's interesting when you hear the term that most of these people are bullies. Most of them, they have a few drinks and they're bullies. That's what they are. And it's interesting when you hear the phrase, a bully isn't looking for a fight, they're looking for a victim. That's the difference. They don't want to go out there, they're not going out having a drink and want to fight with somebody. They're going out, they want to hurt somebody. And when you realise that's the case, and I realised that after my second shift on the door, if you haven't read the chapter yet called Fake, if you read that, you'll understand how I got back on the door and I quit, first of all, because it was just too scary. I went back on the door. But when you realise that it isn't about fighting, it's about not fighting. It's about making sure you don't have to fight. So a good bouncer, a good doorman, will stop the trouble before it gets into the club. That's the first thing. So on the door, when you're questioning people, you're talking to people, you're having a nice chat with them, you can pretty much, not all the time, but you can judge who should be in the club and who shouldn't be in the club. So you turn them away. And when you're turning away people who are violent, you're going to be having trouble with them, physical trouble with them on the door. I've seen, when I've worked with bad teams, I've seen doormen let people in because they don't want it to kick off. They don't want trouble with this person. And stopping them is going to cause trouble. And when that happened, I said, whoa, no. If you're scared of letting them in because there's going to be trouble, you're delaying the inevitable.
What do you think is going to happen when they're inside?
It's going to happen, but you've let them in because you don't want to fight with them and you're hoping they won't fight. I'm not giving them that option. No, you're not coming in. If they're going to kick off, they're going to kick off there and then. That's my job. But the thing is, the person who's going to hit you tells you in 1,000 different ways they're going to hit you. They stand a certain way, they posture a certain way, they say certain things. They do a lot of things that lets you know that they're going to hit you.
They telegraph it.
They telegraph it.
Yeah.
And with experience, you can see it. A lot of people can't see it. Somebody who is going to hit you isn't going to walk back 5 feet and say something aggressive. They're going to walk forward towards you, and they're trying to get into position to throw a punch. And when they're getting in position, how much more do I need to know? They've told me everything I need to know. So my job, unfortunately, is I've got to be first. And being first, that there's no law in the UK that says you can kill somebody and manslaughter is okay. You didn't mean to do it. It's manslaughter, no matter what you say. So doing the job's dangerous, because when that person's in front of you and they've told you through their mannerisms, I think it's I put in the book, 96% of communication is non-verbal. Their mannerisms tell you what they're going to do. So my thing was, and other doormen I worked with was, and they were great at it, they were phenomenal at it, dangerous at it. When they realised it was going to go, they hit the person before the guy even knew, and they're unconscious. It's over, it's finished. But there's the thing. Is it finished? It's finished now, it's over now.
Right.
But what state is that person in? You've heard it. What people get killed with one punch.
Yeah.
And nobody and absolutely nobody with no training whatsoever can hit somebody and kill them. And it happens all the time. And I don't want to be that person being hit. So you hit first. But now you're potentially in a world of trouble, because what's happened to him? And if he's okay, who is he? How connected is he? You've now got trouble a week down the line, 2 weeks down, 2 years down the line. You know, you're dealing with some dangerous people on working the door. When you work on the front of a club as a bouncer, you're essentially saying, I'm going to deal with anybody on the planet, because you don't know who's coming to the door. You don't know what's in their mind.
And you don't know if they're coming back.
You don't think they're going to come back. Yeah. And in the first chapter, the 3 lads involved, they were dangerous lads. They were only young. I'm guessing they weren't fighters. They were drunk. They didn't understand that. But they were, from my understanding, from what we saw afterwards, they were parts of football hooliganism. There are people who walked around with what in states you call craft knives. Stanley knives are called craft knives. Little tiny knives they have in their top pocket, and they would walk into clubs and walk past people and slash their backs and walk on. And it's like so sharp and it's so fast.
Blade or
yeah.
It's
so fast and so sharp. It's just a sting. The person their back is stung. Oh, what was that? Then their back is pouring with blood. And that's kind of the things they do. There's there are people in, if you read up the football hooliganism, there's certain gangs. It's called Chelsea Smile. Have you ever heard of Chelsea Smile?
No.
The Chelsea Smile, a place in Chelsea in London, what they would do is they would get credit cards, and they'd have a fight with somebody. That when the person's unconscious or on the floor, they get a credit card, they put it in their mouth and stamp on it. So it's split there. Or they get a knife and they split it with a knife here.
Like the Joker.
So when the scar was there, they got a smile. And these people exist, and they come to nightclub doors.
Yeah.
And if they get into a club, you've got a world of trouble. So to deal with that, you've got to be on the ball. And every single person's got the ability to learn to be violent for 2 seconds. A real fight, it's not a fight, a real self-defense situation. If you read what's going on, if you know what's happening and you see it, it's over in seconds if you're first. Once you get into a fight where both people are throwing punches, now it's anybody's guess, because adrenaline makes your legs heavy, you'll fall over, your stamina's gone in seconds, you're exhausted, your mind plays tricks with you. It's just, if you get into a fight on the street, it's the worst thing ever. You don't want to get into a fight on the street. You want to avoid it at all costs. It's horrendous.
I was on the wrestling team in high school. I played hockey for years, and then once I got to high school, I had to quit playing hockey because it cost too much, and I switched to wrestling. Now, unlike you, I was not a champion combat athlete. I was, in fact, the opposite of that. I was probably the worst wrestler my school has ever seen.
Okay.
But we train to go 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And 3 minutes is exhausting.
Yeah.
On a wrestling mat.
Yeah.
So I think just that sort of having that understanding and that experience and realizing the real fights, real situations like that, even in a safe environment like a sports environment, it happens quick.
Yeah.
And 3 minutes can be an eternity.
Yeah.
When it comes to that kind of stuff. I'm curious though, because at some point along the line, you left that life. You stopped being a bouncer, right? I'm assuming you're not a bouncer today.
No.
So what, if you're comfortable talking about it, can you tell me what it was that made you eventually move on from the nightlife?
Strangely enough, we're going to go back now to Angus MacGregor, because I left school with 0 qualifications. I was terrible at school. I didn't study. I didn't go sometimes. I wasn't a smart student, and I left school with no qualifications. So when I got my first job, it was like a dead end job in a factory, but I was getting better and better at karate. So I decided I wanted to be a karate instructor, which I became for a full-time living, a karate instructor. And then I started working as nightclub door. And as a bouncer, I was earning really well, because not only was I working the door that the clubs I was working at, I was also putting bouncers on other clubs and making money from them. So I was making some pretty much good money, as a bouncer and as a karate instructor. So I got these two things going. And I believed that that was what I was going to do. That was it. It didn't really occur to me that I could do anything else. I got no real quality. I'm not stupid, but I got no real qualifications.
Right.
So I sat down watching, for a brief moment, one of the ladies doing her shoot for Kasumi Ninja. And she was throwing punches and kicks, but it didn't really look like anything. Anybody could have done it. It wasn't like she was skilled at anything. And the guy who sat with me, who did the makeup for me, I asked him, I said, what's her background? What does she do? And he said, I don't know really. He said, it's to the best of my knowledge. Now, I don't know if it's true or not, because there are people in that game who do look like they've got some technical skills.
Right.
He said, to the best of my knowledge, you're the only skilled talent that we hired. And that resonated. I went, hold on a minute. I'm doing a video game because I've got other skills. I've got skills that are not just for competitive karate. Right. They're not for teaching in a karate club. They're not for fighting in the street. I can utilize these skills in other ways. And my brain just changed gears. And I went, so on the drive home, I've gone, hold on. I could be a fitness. All I've got to do is go and get a qualification in fitness. I could be a fitness coach. I could be a personal trainer. I understand how it works in self-defense situations. I could set up a self-defense. I could do this. I do quite a lot of weight training, personal training. I got all these ideas going in my head. And I'd already decided before I'd gone to this shoot anyway, that it was time as a bouncer, I need to start moving away from that. I was hitting people and they were going down and staying down longer than they should. And I'd heard about brain bleeds afterwards, people, concussion,
sure, people
dying 2 days after a street fight or being hit rather. And I'm thinking, no, and at this point, I'd started when we spoke about mannerisms and dialogue and positioning, and you know that person's going to strike, they're getting ready to hit you, so you hit them first. Right. I'd started to, when I saw that, hit them, but with no real intention. So my intention to have them completely unconscious wasn't there anymore. I'd throw the punch, but I'd let them off the hook. And they're falling over, but they weren't out. I'd almost got a fight on my hands. So now I'm now in danger because I'm not doing what's required or what I thought was required.
Right.
So I'd stopped that alter ego that I had created, that had come out, that had been aggressive and deadly. I'll use the word deadly. Was holding back, was pulling back, and so it's kind of on the cards anyway to move away from it. So that's when that's all kind of started to change then.
Gotcha. For me, I think getting out of the downtown Portland nightclub scene was a very specific. Like there was one specific evening. I had spent an entire summer working for a rooftop nightclub it was like on the third floor of a building in downtown Portland. And then the street level floor, they had a sports bar down there. And so it was kind of two places in one. And I went to work for this guy all summer long. And then he called me, after they closed up for the summer, he called me a couple months later, said, "Hey, I want you to come play New Year's Eve." I said, "Okay." So I get there and he said, "I'm going to have my nephew play upstairs on the patio, and I want you to play down here in the sports bar." So we've got probably 400 plus people upstairs on the patio on the roof. It's me and my 6 friends in the sports bar. Everyone wanted to party on the roof for New Year's Eve.
Yeah.
And about 12:10, 10 minutes after midnight or so, a waitress from upstairs comes into the sports bar and locks the doors. And then all of a sudden I see people running down the hallway from the elevator that goes to the roof. They would go down the hallway and out to the street. I said, "Well, what the hell happened?" "Oh, someone upstairs broke a beer glass and started cutting people with it."
Oh, yeah.
And by absolute sheer luck, my girlfriend at the time, who later became my wife, and our handful of friends, they all had decided to like hang out with me downstairs in the sports bar instead of going upstairs. And so they were locked into the sports bar while everyone else was bleeding, panicking. EMTs were fighting the rush to try and get inside so they could get to the people that got hurt the worst.
Yeah.
There's an ambulance right there by the door, and it was at that point that I just kind of said, I'm done. I'm done dealing with downtown Portland. I can't with this anymore. I'm not going to put my friends, I'm not going to put my girlfriend who I love, I'm not going to put these people in danger.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of stuck to bars and then moved into doing events. This was after I'd already started working for the Portland Retro Gaming Expo. And so I already knew that doing gaming events like the Retro Gaming Expo and that kind of thing, it's so much more freeing. I can be more creative. And honestly, like you were saying at the top of the show, the community is just so much better.
Oh, yeah. Were you privy to, did you see what started that fight? The bottle, the glass, did you see what happened?
So I don't know what happened to start the guy hurting people. But I know what happened that led to that.
Okay.
They thought that serving free champagne on New Year's Eve was a cool idea. They did not think that they were going to need more than 4 door guys for about 400 people.
Okay.
And that combination of things led to a lot of people doing a lot of drinking in a very enclosed space with not a lot of people keeping an eye on them.
Yeah.
And that place is no longer there. Pretty much everybody that I worked with has moved on. I think I can count the number of people I'm still friends with on Facebook on one hand from that job that I had 12 years ago. And so, everyone has moved on, life has moved on. But that was a really key turning point for me.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, the broken bottle in your story immediately just took me back there.
Yeah. I asked that question of, did you see what started it? Because there's a quote in the book that I have some really interesting conversation with people about. Everybody who reads that part are very intrigued in a comment I made. And the comment that I made was that men never get attacked. Sorry, not never get attacked. Men rarely get attacked. Now, how can that be? Surely that isn't the case. Well, of course that isn't the case. Men do get attacked. But I'm talking about in general terms. My point is, men rarely get attacked. What happens is their ego gets attacked, and their ego gets them into a fight. Because if you're in a bar, Are people just going to lash out for no reasons? Does it happen? Of course it does. But in general terms, there's been something said, something done. You've looked at my girlfriend, you've done this, you spilt a drink, and one person can't let it go. Rather than just walk away, they can't let it go. So something happens, and the person's ego doesn't allow them to say, yeah, you're right, and then walk away. They don't do that. They have to do something because of this situation, and that something gets them into a fight. So if you had just an example of a guy staring at you and spitting, and he's drunk, the average guy who can have a fight is not wearing that. They're going to go and say, you can't behave like that, and they end up fighting with them. Somebody who's quite sensible is going to let the guy spit at him. Sounds terrible. Let him spit at him and say, okay, mate, listen, I'm out of here, and leave. Somebody will say, well, why did you leave? You just bought some drinks. Why did you leave? You're not letting get away with that, are you? Well, I'd rather walk away than end up with potential problems I could end up with by showing you lot that I'm not scared, because I am scared. I'm not necessarily scared of now. I'm scared of what's going to happen. I'm scared of what my life's going to be like if I confront this guy. There's no strings around us. There's no ropes around us. There's no cage around us. At any given time, you can walk away. How hard is that to do, though? It's tremendously hard, because our egos don't let us walk away. Our egos say, I'm not letting my friends see that I walked away from somebody being rude to me. I would rather walk away and live another day and just let them complain about me. Listen, what am I fighting with them for? It's when you say it in the cold light of day, it's very easy to understand. But in a real situation, that's why it's called fighting with myself. In a real situation, you're fighting with what is the right thing. What is the most sensible thing to do?
Right.
When there's no fight happening and you can walk away, why don't you?
Yeah, I think and this is kind of my takeaway from what I've read so far at the book. Like I mentioned, I haven't quite finished the book yet, but so much of it that I agree with revolves around this idea that the real confidence doesn't come from showing people that you aren't scared. The real confidence is being able to admit to yourself that you are in fact scared.
Exactly.
And that you need to sort of like own that before you can move on from it.
When you say the word scared and people say, I'm not scared. Well, they're either complete bullshitters or they're totally deranged, because the adrenaline, the fear, it's a human condition. You're supposed to be scared. Being scared isn't something you should be trying to hide from people. Of course you're scared. It's normal. Nobody says, I never need the toilet. I never feel like I need the toilet. I never feel like I have to go to the bathroom. Of course you do. It's human. It happens. Being scared, there isn't a person on the planet who hasn't felt scared. And why people think it's a negative to feel scared, being scared actually is a good thing. It's there to make you fight harder, to run faster, to be aware more. So that adrenaline, that fear, is actually something, if you didn't get it at all, absolutely didn't get it at all, that's worrying. But you're supposed to be scared.
And I can't tell you how much I appreciate this conversation and how much I appreciate your book. Thank you so much for coming on today and sharing a little bit of that with me and with the audience. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it myself. Thank you.
Of course. Listen, where can folks find you? Obviously, the book is available on Amazon, but is it available elsewhere?
If you look for the book online, you'll find it somewhere. Amazon, normally, you can get it on like ebook. You can get the paperback. If you put in Fighting With Myself by Ian McCranor, you'll find it somewhere.
Excellent. And then, of course, Kasumi Ninja, Angus MacGregor himself.
Yeah. You're going to see a lot of him in the next few years.
So you're currently doing a circuit of retro gaming events.
I'm having people contacting me about different events. I've got one in London next week. We've got guaranteed. We've got one that we signed up to do in Germany in November, and I'm just waiting to be invited to them. So whenever that happens, I'll be there.
Are you going to be heading over to the States anytime soon?
Hopefully, yeah. Yeah. I hope. Hey,
fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. I will be there.
Well, I know that you're working with a lot of the Mortal Kombat folks, and you know, we just announced for the Portland Retro Gaming Expo that the entire original cast of the Mortal Kombat game is going to be in person at the Portland Retro Gaming Expo this year. We're so excited to have them all here, and hopefully, you know, I don't know if this year if we'll be able to make it work. It's certainly above my pay grade, but I would love to see you in Portland in the coming years. It'd be great to have you, and I think you'd really enjoy the expo that we have.
I'm sure I would, and if the invite's there, I'll be there.
Well, I'm definitely the people who are involved in making that decision will see this. So, for what it's worth, I mean, you know, this is just one simple DJ's opinion, but I'd love to have you here, and I think you'd be a perfect fit. So,
hey, yeah, thank you so much,
Ian. Thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah, all the best, mate. Thank you.
I have to give a huge thanks to Ian for sharing his stories with me today. Of course, the book is Fighting with Myself. Make sure you check it out. Just Google it. You're going to be able to find wherever is nearest and most convenient for you to be able to pick up either the paperback or the digital. I myself picked up the digital on Amazon just so that I could read a little bit of it in time for the interview. But I think I'm going to go back and get the paperback just on the off chance that Ian ever makes it to Portland and I can have him sign it. That being said, I have some things coming up for the podcast that I'm very excited about. So if you haven't had a chance to subscribe to this YouTube channel yet, I strongly recommend it. I also have a new YouTube series that I'm going to be releasing very, very soon. In fact, there's a possibility that by the time you're seeing this, the first 2 episodes of my new YouTube series are already out. The series is Never Have I Ever Played Blank, and I'll be starting with Minecraft. I have the first 2 Minecraft videos recorded. I'm just trying to get them finished up so that I can release them out into the world, and I would love to hear your feedback, maybe your notes, maybe tell me what I'm doing wrong, because I promise you I'm doing a lot wrong with playing the Minecraft for the very first time. So please make sure that you check out my YouTube channel to find those videos, and of course, I appreciate you taking the time to listen to this podcast today. I've got many, many more episodes of the podcast coming, and I'm looking forward to sharing those with you very, very soon. Until then, take care.